Hey, welcome to the Plant Yourself podcast. I'm your host, Howard Jacobson. Before we get to today's show, a quick reminder that this podcast is free for everyone and supported by those who can afford it. So if you have found this podcast a useful companion during 2020 and you'd like to see it continue through 2021, I would invite you to go to plantyourself.com/gift if you are in a position where you have the means to support something that means something to you and hopefully you think is doing good in the world. You can use PayPal or Patreon. You can make a one-time contribution or become an ongoing, sustaining patron of the show. And if funds are too tight for you to show your appreciation in a monetary sense, you can still leave a review of the Plant Yourself podcast on whatever platform you listen to podcasts. That also helps us a great deal. All right, on to today's episode. This is the Plant Yourself podcast. I'm Howard Jacobson of plantyourself.com, the Big Change Program, and Well Start Health. This podcast is part of my mission to help you live an evidence-based and ethical life. So today's a quick turnaround podcast. The interview that you're going to hear was conducted just a few hours ago this morning. What's today? July 24th, Tuesday, July 24th, 2018. And I just had such a great time on the phone. And we also Skyped so we could see each other's wry expressions as we made jokes back and forth. Ted Barnett, Dr. Veggie. Ted's been in this business for a long time. He went plant-based in 1991 after reading Dean Ornish's book on reversing heart disease with an extremely low-fat plant-based diet. And ironically, he was looking in the literature for the health effects of a vegan diet because he and his wife were already thinking of going vegan for the planet and for animals. And they were just worried that a vegan diet wasn't going to be healthy enough or it was going to be too unhealthy to justify the compromise. And imagine their delight when they discovered that not only was a whole food plant-based diet equal to the standard diet, as well as being far more ethical and easy on the planet, but it actually was far superior in terms of individual health as well. Can you say win-win, boys and girls? So with that, they plowed forward. They raised their family completely vegan. And 27 years later, Ted Barnett is still in the forefront of the effort to get the mainstream medical community to recognize, to accept, to believe in, and to practice and disseminate the power of lifestyle medicine, including a plant-based diet, good movement, sleep hygiene, stress management, and time in nature, and all the rest. So Ted is really smart. He's wise, he's kind, and he's funny as hell. In this interview, you'll discover Barnett's first law and Barnett's second law and Barnett's rules of medicine. We talk about the problems with large studies and randomized controlled trials, and we talk about parachutes and lots more stuff. So I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation with Dr. Veggie, one of the veterans of the plant-based movement. But first, a couple items of business. First thing is, Josh Lajani and I are doing a pair of webinars tonight. That's July 24th at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and also the same time next week on July 31st, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We're doing a pair of webinars on the 3 high hurdles to weight loss and health. And we're going to be going over these 3 mental mistakes, these 3 mindset shifts that have to occur for people once they begin to change their lifestyle, for it to stick, for it to maintain, and for people not to just give up discouraged after a couple of stumbles or setbacks. If you'd like to sign up for that, all you got to do is go to plantyourself.com/now. You'll get redirected to the page where you can watch a video of me talking about the content. You can read all about it, and you can register. Did I mention it's absolutely free? Oh, okay, it's absolutely free. So no reason not to. And also, if you have friends, other people whom you think could use this information, they've sort of been veg curious or they've read the books, but they're still struggling to incorporate the lifestyle, this is what we do at Well Start Health. And we're going to be sharing some of our best ideas with you on this webinar. All right, with the business out of the way, let's get down to pleasure. It's time to mix it up with Dr. Veggie himself. So without further ado, Ted Barnett, Dr. Veggie, welcome to the Plant Yourself podcast.
Thank you, Howard. It's great to be here.
Yes, so I've known you for a long time. We've rubbed elbows at conferences,
Hmm.
and it feels like you've always been in this field. And I'm really curious just about your backstory. Where did you get started? How did you hear about plant-based medicine? Because there wasn't a ton out there when you first tripped upon it.
Sure. So the story goes back to 1991 when my wife Carol and I had two little girls. Uh, Nathaniel, our youngest, wasn't born yet. And in 1990, we read Dean Ornish's book, Reversing Heart Disease, in which he talks about the research he did in the late 80s on how to reverse heart disease using uh, diet and a little exercise, a little meditation, and actually demonstrated that arteries could open up. And he did it using angiography to establish a baseline at the beginning of the study. And 1 year into the study, the patients all underwent angiography again. And it was a randomized controlled trial, which is always difficult to do when you're dealing with lifestyle medicine and diet. But he did it and demonstrated that at the end of the year, the people in the experimental group, the ones who got the 10% calories from fat, almost completely vegan diet, demonstrated opening of their arteries. And when I say almost completely vegan, he did allow some egg white and 1 cup of non-fat dairy or the equivalent every day. And since then, I think it's evolved to where we don't include those anymore. But it was really quite remarkable because I'm an angiographer. Part of what I do as an interventional radiologist is to put catheters in people's arteries and do diagnostic studies and take a look at what the arteries look like. And it had never occurred to me that an artery could ever open up on its own. And in medical school, it always seemed that arteries that were clogged up with plaque were basically filled with concrete, and that concrete was never going to open up. But he demonstrated that there's actually an active equilibrium going on. If you can change what's going on in your blood, the plaque can resorb a little faster than it's being laid down, and it starts to open up. And since then, we've also learned that there's a lot of inflammation going on underneath the surface of the plaque, and if you can cut down on the inflammation, then the plaque itself starts to regress. So that was fascinating to me. At the time, my father, who was in his late 70s, was developing some signs of vascular disease, and we had thought about maybe getting him involved. He was a pathologist and needed a little more persuasion. That didn't seem scientific enough to him. But anyway, so like any good parents, well, we decided we would perform an experiment on our children. So we said, let's all become vegans. And not only that, but we'll become low-fat vegans. We'll see if we can do this 10% route. And we did it basically overnight. I mean, one of the reasons that we got interested was my wife had been interested in the animal aspect. She'd gotten some mailings from PETA over the last 5 or 6 years. I was interested in the environmental aspect, which I still am very much interested in. And we thought, well, let's do it. And so we started in 1991. Nathaniel hadn't been born yet. He was born in 1992. And he's been vegan since before birth. And it's worked out really well. All 3 of our kids are now grown. They're 27, 29, and 31. Still vegangelists, trim, healthy. All went to good colleges. In fact, I joke that I've had the good fortune of being able to send a fortune in tuition checks to some of America's finest institutions of higher learning, including Yale, Oberlin, NYU, Colgate. Yeah,
Well,
all those places.
where I thought you were going with that was you were so impressed with Dean Ornish's RCT that you were going to raise one of your daughters vegan.
Ah, right. We could have done, yeah, well, that would have been, exactly. Yeah, that wouldn't have been hard. So anyway, so the,
Well, so
yeah,
so I want to just come back to a couple of things because the way you told the story,
yeah,
um, it's like this might have happened to anyone, but like first of all, you found yourself reading Dean Ornish,
right.
which like most people didn't do. Was that because of Carol, your wife, because of her interest in animal welfare that you were sort of drawn to that? Was it an accident? Did someone give it to you? How did you find yourself
Yeah,
accidentally
right.
reading a book?
So obviously it wasn't an accident. I'm trying to remember. I think it may have had something to do with the fact that my father was having vascular disease, and somehow we found out about Dean Ornish. Um, the I remember we were already talking about becoming vegan before that. So it sounded dangerous to me. And I wanted, because my parents are smart, they would have not fed me a diet that was unhealthy, so I thought. And so I was looking at other resources for, well, is this actually healthy or not? And all I was really looking for was, is it equivalent? In other words, is it no more dangerous than what we were already eating? Because from an environmental standpoint, I think it's pretty obvious that eating a plant-based diet is way better for the planet and way better for the environment. We already knew that, I think, at that time. So the idea of looking at books that were more about health was, I think, really helpful because it convinced me that not only was it safe, but it was much safer and much healthier.
Right. That's kind of ironic thinking back now that well, this thing has these ethical benefits and practical benefits, and what's the trade-off? Like, am I willing to live a slightly less healthy life being vegan?
Exactly.
And then we discover just the opposite.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. So my second question is, what made you accept that this was possibly true when it's now almost 30 years later and most of your profession, still doesn't believe it. I spent the weekend with a cardiologist, and we were talking about it, and he's like, well, there's really no proof. There's some suggestion, but 27 years ago, you found this credible. What's wrong? What was wrong with you? Why didn't you toe the party line?
Right. That's a pretty interesting question. And actually, you're taking me back now. And I do remember there's a line or a paragraph in Ornish's book. And Ornish is a great thinker. There's just no question about it. And obviously, something at some point in his life clicked. And, the aha moments, right? I call them the sloping forehead moments when you go like this. Right? And basically, he talks about how difficult it is to get funding for any research into nutrition or lifestyle changes, basically lifestyle, because there's very little money in it for anybody, for any company or corporation or any entrepreneur. It's just not a great way of, it's not a great business model for making a lot of money. So you realize that you need someone else other than drug companies who are the major funders. You need government or someone else to fund research like that. And he basically talks about how difficult it is to get research funding for that. And then I realized, well, so the curve is always being pushed in one direction. We always are trending toward things that are going to cost more money, and especially if it makes money for, the corporations. And we're always going to tend to ignore or even make fun of those things that are inexpensive, even if they work better. So actually, that's when I developed Barnett's first law. So Barnett's first law is things, so if I can get this right, it's my own law. You'd think I'd be able to know. But basically, the idea is that free or inexpensive solutions to problems will be much less well known than expensive problems, even if the expensive than expensive treatments, even if the expensive treatments aren't nearly as good. So I'll say it again. So free or inexpensive solutions to problems will never be as well known as expensive treatments, even if they're better. And the point here is that, it's really pretty cheap to put somebody in a whole food plant-based diet. The problem is there's nobody in three-piece suits out there pushing broccoli and brown rice, or that's kind of stereotypical. We eat lots more than that, but you get the idea.
Yeah.
There's plenty of people out there pushing expensive treatments and expensive medication, expensive procedures. I mean, when I put stents in as one of the things I do in radiology, in interventional radiology, I don't have to get permission from the insurance company to put a stent technologist, and I say, hand me that stent, and that's $2,000. And if the stent wasn't long enough and I need to put another one in, that's another $2,000. And there's no problem. But if I want to put somebody through one of the programs that I'll tell you about later, one of my programs in lifestyle medicine, which we could get by, probably do for $1,000 for an entire year, it's just not part of the system. And so the expensive solutions are out there. They're going to be much more well known because you've got these big systems in place, and the salesman shows up every day at our office, that type of thing. So
okay, so you say one little thing in there really caught my attention. So it makes sense that things are going to be there's no rep driving from doctor to doctor's office with a trunk full of broccoli and brown rice.
Right.
But so there's less overt marketing, but you also said that it will be sort of made fun of.
Yeah, yeah.
Like to me, that's like if you show me the study
Right.
of Ornish or someone else, and you show me it's a well done study, and there's angiography, and there's proof, or like, okay, well then, but that's not enough to overcome
Right.
the kind of bias that this is like. So what did you see in terms of how it's made fun of? Because in my mind, I can kind of hear all these things, but it feels like you're kind of going down to sort of the fundamentals of where this all started, where the prejudice against lifestyle and specifically plant-based came from.
Interesting question. So, part of it is, well, we've always done it this way, so it must be right. What you're talking about is completely different from what we've always done, and also sounds so easy that if it really worked, we would already be doing it, right? And so it's very circular in that sense. I think one of the criticisms of Ornish has always been that, it's too small of a study. We can't prove anything from that. And I've kind of, my thinking has evolved over the years on that. I really am very skeptical of big studies now. And I'm looking much more for small studies that have a lot of power. And the example I often give to people is there's an article that was written in the British Medical Journal, I don't know, 15 years ago or something, about it's a meta-analysis of all the randomized controlled trials on the use of parachutes for jumping out of airplanes. You've probably seen that article.
No.
Oh yeah, it's a great article. The authors say, well, we did an analysis we looked for all the randomized controlled trials on parachute use, and we couldn't find any. And so we believe that those in favor of evidence-based medicine should all participate in one of these randomized controlled trials, which would involve a crossover. So if you're not the right, so everybody would get the if you were able to jump out of the airplane with a parachute the first time, the second time you'd have to jump out without the parachute. Anyway, take a look at the article. It's pretty funny, but the idea is obviously tongue in cheek. But it was published in the British Medical Journal. It might have been April Fool's issue. I'm not sure. But the point is, you don't need large studies often to prove your point. And you and I have talked in the past about the PREDIMED study, which is a huge study, and it ends up being
right. Can you, and for people who aren't aren't nerds like us, can you describe it?
Sure. The PREDIMED study is about the research done on the Mediterranean diet, and I think it was completed a couple of 3 or 4 years ago. And basically, they had 7,500 people living in Spain who were randomized into 3 groups, and one group was told to go on a low-fat diet. The second group was they were considered the control, I guess, although it really wasn't a true control. But anyway, another group was given a gift of nuts every week, and they were asked to incorporate nuts into their diet. And the third group was given extra virgin olive oil. And then they compared the results of the 3 groups, and they said, oh, look, the people on the low-fat diet, their outcomes weren't as good. And it turns out the differences between the 3 groups was minimal. The, quote, low-fat diet was really 37% calories from fat, which is in no way a low-fat diet when we're talking 10% calories from fat in the Ornish program. So, but because they had spent, in my opinion, so much money and so much effort on this huge study, they had to get some conclusion out of it. So they did. And then that was published a couple of years ago. And then just in the last month or so, they published a retraction saying, well, yeah, it turns out there were a lot of mistakes in the study. But meanwhile, the newspapers and everybody are running around saying how great the Mediterranean diet is and how lousy low-fat diets are. And basically drawing conclusions from this huge study, which, if you're only looking for big studies, it would be great. It's got 7,500 people. But the point is it was not a well-done study, and it was misinterpreted as far as I'm concerned. So I look at little studies, and a lot of doctors do this all the time. When you have somebody come in who's got diabetes, and 2 weeks later you put them on a whole food plant-based diet that's low fat, and 2 weeks later they don't have diabetes anymore. Well, that's pretty helpful. Or if their cholesterol drops 70 points in 2 weeks, well, that's pretty useful. So you have to combine, and it's not that it's unscientific, but go ahead, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, do we need large studies because of most studies are done on drugs, and so we need to have large populations in order to catch side effects that might be rare but fatal. And so we've taken this idea that large studies are good, right, and applied it in an area where the regular rules don't apply.
No, I think that's a good point. I mean, yeah, because drugs, you have to look for side effects. I mean, the other thing, of course, when you mention drug studies, is you can do a placebo, which that's the beauty of drugs, right? You can give somebody a capsule that doesn't contain anything, and they don't know. You can't do that with broccoli. People know if you're giving them plastic broccoli. So, so the large study, yeah, I know you're more of an expert on this than I am, but you do need certain power to look for side effects. So,
but if you're offering an intervention that
right.
that you presume does not have negative side effects,
right,
then you don't need those numbers.
Well, that's true. I mean, of course, there's that presumption. Well, maybe there are those people out there who are having negative side effects.
Yeah. Well, also, you said that the control group in the PREDIMED was not a true control. What do you mean by that?
Well, they were also asked. They also got an intervention, which is they were asked to change to a quote low-fat diet, and ended up lowering their fat intake to minimally. I mean, they ended up going from 38% to 37%, something like that. But they were clearly in a high-fat diet anyway, by our standards. And the other problem was it was all self-reported. There were just so many things wrong with that study. And maybe it's not fair to pick on them, but because I think they worked hard at it.
Yeah.
But
well, I mean, I blame the New York Times, and I also blame doctors like this the cardiologist I was talking about. That's the one study he raised to say this is the only proof we have in a randomized controlled trial of diet that the Mediterranean diet is the only one.
Right.
And I said, well, first of all, it's been retracted, but second of all, even if it hadn't been retracted, even if it had been sort of foolproof in its methodology, didn't you read the numbers?
Right. It was
like
hardly
the only statistically significant finding was I believe the people who had nuts had 30% fewer strokes.
Right.
But no fewer deaths.
Right, exactly. The death from any outcome was the same among all three groups. And so obviously you couldn't draw huge conclusions. Whereas, we probably shouldn't spend too much time on that. But I'm thinking what I've found now, and I think this is going to be how things will change in the future, is that doctors are beginning to recognize that their own health is in jeopardy. And they try these things out and they go, wow, I had no idea this would work so quickly. So we just finished a pilot program with 26 patients, and it was 2 weeks. It was a 15-day jumpstart, basically. And a couple of our consultants also went through the program. And the idea was they came in Saturday morning. We did finger stick lipid profiles and blood glucose, and we were able to give people the results instantly. We then gave them breakfast, and we fed them propaganda about the whole food plant-based diet. And 2 weeks later, we had them come back in again on a Saturday morning, get their finger sticks, and they were shocked. So one of our consultants, his cholesterol, he said, my cholesterol's never been under 200. It started at 220. At the end of 2 weeks, it's 151. We had patients routinely like that going through. So when you see those kinds of incredibly powerful results, you start to wonder, well, gee, what is it with these huge studies? How come they're not demonstrating these major changes? And there's obviously other things going on. But when you look at each individual, there's this incredible disconnect because we have this incredibly powerful diet that works really rapidly. And no doctor can really deny that. They see the lab results, and then they see the patients start to lose weight. But for whatever reason, we like to have big studies. So I'm basically at this point saying, look, we know this works. The challenge here is getting people to stick with it and changing the culture enough so that people can stick with it. Because really, and that's where the research needs to be done. The research is not whether it works at this point. The research needs to be done on what programs actually help people to stay with it. And that's kind of the challenge we're trying to address with our businesses. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I can't remember where I heard this, but the phrase, sure, it works in practice, but does it work in theory?
Yeah, that's good. I like that. Yeah, exactly.
Tell us more about what kind of businesses and what kind of research you're doing. What are you doing to push the movement forward?
So I'm still working nearly full-time as an interventional radiologist, which I enjoy and I'm good at, and it helps pay the bills. In fact, it's the only thing right now that pays the bills. But we started Rochester Lifestyle Medicine in 2015, and then in 2 years later, in the spring of 2017, we started the Rochester Lifestyle Medicine Institute. So both of these organizations are trying to push forward plant-based nutrition and helping to make lifestyle medicine the standard of care for pretty much everything, 80 or 85% of what ails people in this country. Because mostly what's ailing people are chronic illnesses such as diabetes and heart disease, and as Caldwell Esselstyn would say, foodborne illness, basically, and what we put in our mouths every day. And it doesn't have a lot of glamour, getting people to change their diet, but it's incredibly effective. So, when I started back in 1991, we were not calling this lifestyle medicine. That term had not really crossed my lips. But, in the last decade or so, lifestyle medicine has become a more well-known term. I now have my boards in lifestyle medicine. They gave the inaugural examination last fall out in Tucson, Arizona, the American Board of...
So I'm so curious about that because, what was the test like? Because and how different was it from the standard test that you would have gotten?
Well, the test was hard, I will say that, and it was in many ways it was very conventional. I mean, we sat in a room with proctors and computers, and it was multiple choice and pretty long. There were, I think, 250 questions, and
the answer to every single question was rice and broccoli, right? Exactly.
It was rice and broccoli. So the areas that were covered. So lifestyle medicine doesn't just cover diet. So sleep is an important part of it. There's actually the lifestyle medicine vital signs that we talk about. And let's see if I can get these right. It's been a while since I took the test, but anyway.
There's no proctors here.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Can I look at my notes?
You can look.
Yeah, I don't have it out.
You have tattoos.
Yeah, exactly. So, but basically, you're looking at BMI, so weight and obesity. You're looking at sleep habits. You are looking at the actual diet that people are consuming, and activity patterns, so whether people are getting exercise. And these are all important features of lifestyle medicine: stress, social support, and we refer to those as the lifestyle medicine vital signs. And there was actually a seminal article published in the New England Journal, in JAMA in 2010, which basically covers these by a woman named Liana Leonoff, who is kind of the mother of lifestyle medicine. And so it was considered a classic article. But where were we going with this? So
about the boards.
So the tests, they ask you about what evidence is there about diet and heart disease, diet and diabetes. What can you expect when people make certain changes? There were questions about melatonin, some physiology and sleep physiology, that type of thing. But basically, if you were a family practice doc, I think the questions were relatively easy. I'm not a family practice doc. So I was actually sitting with two of my colleagues. There's an incredible photograph of the three of us waiting to take these boards. So Carrie Graff, who's a family practice doc locally in Canandaigua, New York, she's sitting at one end, and Susan Friedman is sitting between the two of us. Susan Friedman is a geriatrician and hospitalist at a big teaching hospital. And then there's me, an interventional radiologist who happens to have kind of taken this up late in life. And you can tell by our expressions who feels like they're going to pass and who's and I kind of look kind of glum and nervous. And luckily we all passed. But Carrie Graff, who was clearly been doing this the longest and most involved, I wouldn't say the longest, but the most involved because she's family practice. She looked quite happy. Anyway, all three of us passed. There's actually 5 of us now in Rochester who've passed our lifestyle medicine boards. They're all connected to Rochester Lifestyle Medicine, and which is something I'm really proud of. There's only 204 people on the whole planet now, in fact, the entire solar system, who have their boards in lifestyle medicine. So,
that's like a million and a half Americans for every one.
That's right. Exactly. It's a good point. Yeah, good math. Anyway, so I want to go back to how doctors will be persuaded of this. So I think we like to refer to lifestyle medicine as evidence-based, and it truly is. But sometimes you just have to recognize that there are other ways to do studies beside the randomized controlled double-blind study, because obviously that doesn't work on lifestyle. And so it doesn't mean the lifestyle doesn't work. It just means you can't use that as your gold standard. Now what I'm seeing is doctors trying this on themselves and saying, wow, it worked for me. I'm trying it in my family. It's working for them. Every patient who does this, it seems to work for them. I guess I don't need a trial of 100,000 people because every time I try this on somebody, if they do it, it seems to work. And so we just need to somehow change the scientific paradigm around this, not to be unscientific. I absolutely think we need to be scientific about these things, and you can put it to the test. When you put if you put homeopathy to the test, it doesn't work. If you put lifestyle medicine to the test, it does work. So we don't advocate any of what were often termed integrative or alternative treatments. We're basically trying to stick with what's evidence-based. So that's my spiel on that. Yeah. Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier, like the big, in terms of marketing, we need to do more to create these new paradigms for doctors to accept other forms of evidence as paramount. And I've talked to Joel Kahn about this, and he really is a big fan of Walter Longo's 5 pillars, where that takes a broad brush. But the thing you said that really needs research is how do we get people to adopt and maintain this? So what do you know about that? Because I've co-founded a startup dedicated to that, so I'm very greedy for anything that works that other people are doing.
Sure. You're talking about the purple carrot now?
No, this is WellStart Health.
Oh, you're involved with WellStart. Oh, okay. Yeah, right.
Yeah, I'm the chief of behavioral science.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I guess it's in some ways it's a little more like psychiatry in that it's very individual, both on the side of the person administering the treatment and the side of the patient, right? So, we know that talk therapy seems to work when it's done by a good psychiatrist, but of course, then what's a good psychiatrist? And that's going to be very dependent on the individual. I mean, I guess the beauty of a pharmaceutical is that it doesn't really matter who's administering it, especially if it's something simple like an antibiotic and you're trying to treat an infection. It honestly doesn't really matter if the doctor giving you it has good bedside manner or, right? The antibiotic either is going to work or it isn't. But in this situation, we're dealing with getting people to make major changes to their lives. And I think there's going to be thousands of different approaches, and many of them will work. And of course, that makes it confusing and difficult for insurance companies to know how they're going to, what to pay for. So, for example, we use the CHIP program, the Complete Health Improvement Program, which was developed in Loma Linda, California, back in, almost 25, 30 years ago by Hans Diehl. And it's got probably the most literature of any lifestyle intervention. And so it's in that sense, it's kind of classic medicine. It's published, it's in the peer-reviewed literature. And for people who stay with the program, it works. It's a long program. It takes anywhere between 9 and 18 weeks to administer. It can be somewhat expensive. So we are working on our own short-term programs because we think that's another way to get people engaged is with these jump starts. So we just put 26 people through a jump start. And as I was saying earlier, we got really good results. But of course, once the 2 weeks is over, then what? Mm-hmm. So we're struggling with how to keep people engaged after that. So we use closed Facebook groups. We have volunteer coaches. I do think it's going to be difficult to get this into the conventional medical system because you're going to have to use a lot of volunteers to make this work.
Sorry, you broke up for a second there. So
to get reimbursement.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
So say that again. You broke up for a second. It's difficult because
Sure.
you'll have to.
Well, to get this into the medical system, it's going to be difficult because I think insurance companies are never going to pay a lot for it. It's always going to be easier for a doctor to put his kids through college and make, buy his cars, make car payments, if he's doing something that nobody else can do, right? Which is, administer medication, perform a procedure, do an operation, that type of thing. Where, you can't take out your own appendix, right? But you can change your own diet. So I think it's hard for people to see the value in these lifestyle interventions, even when they are more powerful. So I think we're going to have to use volunteer energy. I know we're seeing that. It's one of the reasons we started our nonprofit, because we have all these people who really, really want to help, mainly people who've been through the program themselves and then want to kind of be buddies and mentors to other people who are in need of the program. So, we have one guy who's lost over 100 pounds, and he's now one of our biggest advocates, and he's helping other people do the same thing, and devoting his volunteer energy. But you can understand why that's a tricky business model, right? Because it doesn't make a lot of money for anybody. So, and I'm sure you're struggling with that if you have a startup.
Right. Well, hey, we got to talk offline. I don't want to market my startup
sure.
overtly on the podcast to people who don't care. But that's what we do is the follow up.
Right.
Is digital support for up to a year.
Right. Right. No, I think that's great.
Yeah. Well, and the way the model is set up now, I think in a very reductionist sense, there's no money to be made in helping people get well, and certainly doctors who are then told, hey, you have to do this thing that anybody who can chop an onion can do.
Right.
And probably a lot of people with a better bedside manner than you could do it better. There's going to be a threat. But when you look at the global economy and how runaway healthcare costs are sinking this country, if you think about like taking one person and reversing their type 2 diabetes, and think about, let's say, the 5-year cost savings, and you think about it as a pie chart, and then you think, well, let's split that between the employer, the patient, and the company that, the people who do the intervention. I think there's plenty to go around.
Yeah, there sure is. But on the other hand, if they don't get sick to begin with, right? But the diabetes is a great example. So my understanding is the average person costs about $5,000 a year in healthcare costs. When they get diabetes, it goes up to $10,000 a year. Then when they go into renal failure and end up on dialysis, it goes to $100,000 a year. And these are patients I deal with every day, patients on dialysis. That's one of the things we do in interventional radiology, is take care of their fistulas and that type of thing. And you're right, it's just an astounding amount of money. But the question is, who in the system has the incentive to change that? But you said something earlier about the global economy, and I think it's really, really important because if you step back, we have this crazy system now where we're basically destroying the planet in pursuit of animal products and causing runaway global warming, all that kind of stuff. So much of it would be remedied if we were eating lower on the food chain. And then the result of that is it makes us sick. So where's the logic there? We really, for the first time, and this has been an evolution since we started these organizations, I now actually am very upfront about we can't be advocating medical treatments that are at odds with the health of the planet. We just can't. Fortunately, whole food plant-based nutrition is completely aligned with the health of the planet and advocating that. So thank goodness, because it would be pretty hard, I think, to justify saying, well, we have this other we have this other treatment for you, but it's not good for the planet. It would save you, but it would be bad for the planet. Fortunately, we don't have to tell people that. We can tell you, we have this treatment for you, and not only is it great for you, but it's also really great for the health of the planet. So your children and grandchildren will actually have a viable biosphere to live in.
Yeah. And it reminds me of the work of a friend of mine, David Eisenberg, who founded the Developmental Center for Appropriate Technology. He was basically trying to get building inspectors to consider the health of the planet, instead of saying, well, this building is safe because it's structurally sound, as opposed to this building created 5 tons of waste and hazardous runoff, and therefore it's technically safe for the inhabitants of the building, but unsafe in a small way for everybody else.
Ah, that's interesting.
Right.
I'd like to hear more about that at some point too. That's pretty interesting. Yeah. Huh.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's our brains. We're scared of airplanes falling out of the sky, but we're not scared of heart disease. Right.
Exactly.
Right. The slow, incremental, sure thing is less scary than the acute, dramatic event.
Right. Which actually reminds me of Barnett's second law, which I can remember. Go ahead.
Oh, good. I want all of them.
So Barnett's second law. There's only 2. Barnett's second. I have a bunch of rules of medicine, which are different, but this is the second law is that nobody gets credit for bad things that don't happen, and it has really to do with why prevention is just not that interesting or exciting. It's very hard to prove that you've prevented something awful from happening. So one of the examples I like to give is, well, on 9/11, if the FBI had figured out that these crazy people were going to be flying airplanes into the Twin Towers and they somehow intervened and it didn't happen, would we be sitting around 17 years later saying, wow, we really dodged that bullet? Just think of all the terrible wars we'd be in right now and all the, increased regulations at airports and all these things. It would have been a mess if that had happened. Glad we dodged that bullet, right? No, because there would be no proof that it ever would have happened. Nobody would believe you. So it's the same thing with, well, when did you get up this morning and thank Jonas Salk because you don't have polio, right? No, I wasn't going to get polio.
Yeah.
So I think, and it makes sense. It's logical, and it's also human nature to not really focus on those things that are kind of theoretical. You're much more focused on the things that are immediate, that the obvious danger right in front of you. And politicians take advantage of that all the time by, making you afraid of something that's somehow made to feel imminent. Right. And anyway, that in medicine, you run into this all the time. People just are not. They give you credit if you save them from a disease you obviously have. If you have pneumonia and you get better because you got antibiotics, wow, I'm convinced. If you have angina and we put a stent in and tomorrow you don't have angina, fine. I'll give you credit for that. But if 10 years ago you put me on a whole food plant-based diet and now I don't have angina, you're not going to know. You're not going to really give anybody credit. So.
Right. So what are your rules of medicine?
Oh, Barnett's rules. Well, again, I don't have them right in front of me, but so Barnett's first rule is don't screw up the easy stuff. Okay. So basically, and I won't even explain that one, but I'll go to Barnett's second rule is if you make fun of another doctor, they will turn out to be right.
Yeah.
And so I'm very careful to not ridicule or make fun of other doctors. And I find the same thing with just people in general. So a really good example of that is I told you about the patient who lost over 100 pounds. And he took my course on plant-based nutrition. I teach a 6-week course on plant-based nutrition. We've given it 15 times and almost 700 people have taken it. It's accredited for physicians to get 12 CMEs, but the public can take it. So he was one of the members of the public who took it last January and February. And then I met him at a meeting and he was telling me, I'm not getting enough lysine. And I said, how do you know that? And he said, well, I'm using Chronometer, this food diary. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. Yeah. And I started to say, look, that's reductionist. If you're just eating a whole food plant-based diet, you don't have to worry about these things. You're going to get enough. And I felt myself starting to ridicule him, right? Luckily, he's a very humorous guy who's very confident in himself. And so we had a good banter and a good back and forth. But as I started to feel like, okay, I'm beginning to ridicule this man, maybe he's got some kind of a point. So I said, what is this Chronometer thing? So he shows me, and it actually, for geeks like me and for him, and maybe even for you, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, it's actually a fascinating program that gives you all the breakdown of all the food you're eating. Now, we know that's very reductionist, and if you're eating a whole food plant-based diet, you don't have to worry about that. But there are people who need to be convinced, and it may only take a day or two for them to see, gee, I put all the food in. And of course, there's only one thing they care about, which is protein, right? And it looks like I'm getting enough protein. Okay, this will work. So that's Barnett's second law. The other laws I haven't looked at are rules. The other ones I haven't looked at in a while. So
okay,
I'll email them to you when I find them.
Right. So before we go, I'm curious about what you have personally discovered, your insights into working with people at various stages of readiness. Because one of the things, as with our startup, we're getting people, initially the work I was doing.
I lost you.
Hey, can you hear me now?
We're back connection. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay,
you broke up for a minute there.
Okay.
You go back to where your startup.
Yeah. So with the startup, where we're getting people, some of whom our initial clients came because of the books I've written and because of the podcast that I do. So they're on board and they just need help, figuring out how to deal with cravings, how to deal with social situations, how to get moving. They're at a different level versus people who come in completely unconvinced. And to give you an example, we're working with a company where the first group came in sort of cold. The second group came in following an intensive 5-day immersion. And the difference between those two groups. How do you kind of assess and think about, when do you talk about, how to introduce people both convincing them and getting them to start taking steps?
Right. Well, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? And so it's basically, in a lot of ways, it's marketing, a term I'm not really fond of. But my wife and I have been basically working in this area since 1995 when we started running the Rochester Area Vegan Society. And so we're constantly running programs. And the idea is to change the culture. And then 3 years ago, when we started Rochester Lifestyle Medicine, it was sort of the same idea. We started running a Lifestyle as Medicine lecture series at the Rochester Academy of Medicine. We've had all the big names come to Rochester pretty much every month. And you have to change the culture so people have heard about what you're doing. You're right. If someone, you can assess readiness to change. There are questionnaires that will help you to assess that. But someone who is completely cold and is not interested, you're probably not someone you want to put through this program. However, when they start to hear about it from their friends and they see it in the paper or they hear about it on the radio, then they start to get interested. Then, of course, they get sick and they mention it to their doctor. The doctor says, well, there's this program. So it's not a simple question to answer, right? But I think as a culture, we need to move forward as a culture. And at some point, the culture is going to have changed so much that what we're saying is going to just sound normal. Why are you even telling me this? Of course, eating plants is good for you. And once that happens, we're going to sort of be out of a job, but which I guess is a good thing. But everyone's individual. People definitely need social support. You look at some of the things in the blue zones or the Maois, which are these little groups of 5 people that have always lived together. So
what's that?
We put the Maoi from the blue zones. You're familiar. I'm sure you're familiar with the blue zones.
I'm familiar with the blue zones. I haven't heard the term Maois.
Yeah. And it's Mawei. It's a Japanese term, I believe. We can look that one up later.
Sure. So from Okinawa.
Yeah. So basically, from the time you're a little kid, you're assigned to this little group of 5 people. And they're going to be basically your best friends for the rest of your life. And you're always going to get together on a regular basis. And it's that social support that humans need because we are truly social animals. So we like to get people into little groups of 4 to 6. We hook them up through a closed Facebook group, which I think is good on a short-term basis. But really, it's that human connection. So that is the $1 million question: is how to get people to stick with it. I think it's pretty easy to persuade people that it works. It didn't used to be. I would say 10 years ago it was very hard to persuade people that it works. Now I think it's much easier to persuade people that it works. One, because it's become sort of more accepted in the media. Doctors actually, believe it or not, are becoming persuaded of this. And so now the challenge is really getting people to stick with it. When they're surrounded by all these cultural cues, there's fast food restaurants every 100 feet on various roads. People are surrounded by commercials. They're surrounded by all this tantalizing food that's all been processed to hit their bliss points. It's tough.
Yeah.
So
and one of the things I'm seeing is, and I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but when it starts to work, it's like a binary switch is flipped, in that they're no longer of this culture.
Right.
Right. Then now, all of a sudden, I hear this from so many people that now, okay, I've accepted this, and I've also now changed my views on 10 other things, because it's like like that story Flatland, where the all the creatures are two-dimensional.
Two-dimensional, right?
And then one of them gets flipped up in the air and now can see things differently and can't. When they return, they can't explain.
Right.
But they're part of a different. They can't unknow what they've known. Do you find that when people adopt that's the inoculation, that now the fast food signs, it's like, that's not my culture anymore?
That's right. And I like the analogy of flipping a switch. I actually end up using that term a lot with doctors. I've seen this a lot, that doctors who've been challenging me and even ridiculing me for decades, so suddenly the switch flips. And you think, wow, that's just really interesting, because there's been this resistance to even accepting it at all. And then, of course, once you accept this premise, the rest is pretty obvious to those of us who've been thinking about it for as long as we have. And that, I think, then it becomes obvious to them as well. I mean, I've got a great story, which I probably don't have time to tell, but I'll tell it anyway. You can edit it out. This is one of the things we do in interventional radiology is we do procedures all day long. So this is the end of, and like every hour, another patient comes in with some other problem, and it might be they need their Mediport fixed, for injecting chemotherapy from their oncologist, or they might have a fistula that needs to be repaired for dialysis, whatever. Anyway, it's Friday afternoon. It's 4 o'clock. Everybody on my team is exhausted. There's the nurses and techs are standing around. They just can't wait to get out and go home. We still have 2 patients left, and it's 4 o'clock now. So they know they're going to be there late. And then the phone rings, and you can see the look on their faces. Oh my, oh my, somebody wants to add on a case. So I see the nurse go and pick up the phone. She writes a little note. She hangs up. Then she comes out and hands me the note. It's and the look on her face is, Dr. Barnett, under no circumstances am I going to allow you to add another case on, right? So I call the number, and it's this oncologist who I've known for years. And I said, how can I help you? Thinking he's going to have a port or something that's going to need to be fixed. He says, Ted, I totally get this plant-based thing now. I said, oh, hey, can I call you back? Because we still have 2 patients left. But anyway, it was just such a relief. But there was a switch that flipped. And you see it all the time. For whatever reason, I tend to think it has a lot to do with doctors realizing that they are also human and going to get these illnesses. And they start to think about, gee, how can I change my way of living? So yeah, there is a switch. And we see it in patients. There was just a rant the other day on one of our Facebook groups about this woman who took our 2-week jump start. Now she walks into the grocery store and she can't believe all the food, all the processed food that she's seeing. It's just unreal to her. So yeah.
And you mentioned your I think it's your second law about don't ridicule other doctors. And
right.
One reason not to ridicule them is that they turn out to be right. But even if that's not the case,
right?
If your oncologist friend had felt ridiculed, he might never have gotten there, right?
Exactly.
That we have to figure out how to talk to other professionals in a way that allows them to save face when they discover the truth.
Sure. Right. Well, that's actually probably a cultural skill that we all ought to be working towards in a lot of areas, not just medicine, right? Is how do we talk to people who don't agree with us? And that's a big challenge. But you're right. In medicine, we have certain ways of talking. So we use evidence. We're gentle about it, and I think persistence pays off. I mean, that's kind of what I'm known for. Is all these setbacks, and believe me, there's been lots, especially since I actually started doing it as a living. When I was just doing it for myself and my family, it wasn't really costing me anything, right? Now I've got, a company that's actually a medical group, Rochester Lifestyle Medicine Group, and we actually are seeing a lot of patients now, but it's still one of those things where it's not making money, and it's, but doctors are sending us patients, which is exciting.
So what? Yeah. Sarai Stancic.
Sorry. Yeah, sure.
Right. The doctor.
She's great.
Yeah. And she's talking about she started a lifestyle medicine practice. Everyone told her she was crazy. Right. And she discovered to her amazement that her best referral source were other doctors, but before they became referral sources, they wanted to be her patients. Right. Like, are you discovering that there's sort of like a curious approach avoidance thing going on with medical professionals?
Approach avoidance. Yeah, well, we definitely have seen doctors that come to consult with us one-on-one. We also have, as I mentioned, quite a lot of doctors who've taken the course, the plant-based nutrition course, in which I try to gently outline, lay out all the evidence. And I think that that's been persuasive. But yeah, we definitely see doctors coming through because they want to find out for their own health issues. A lot of them are overweight, a lot of them have arthritis, high cholesterol, that type of thing. So yeah.
Okay. So before I let you go, what is the near future?
Stop moving there for a second.
Huh? What's that?
Yeah. Okay. I didn't hear that. Go back.
Okay.
About 12 seconds.
Oh. Okay. That's the price of seeing your smiling face is that we're having a little audio.
I'm sorry.
Show.
I can turn it off. Should I turn it off?
No, we're almost done. We made it this far. We're gonna punch it across the goal line.
Plow forward. Okay.
I'm just curious what you see the next 5 years holding for you. What's on your agenda? What would you like to accomplish?
I enjoy very much what I do as an interventional radiologist, so I think I'll be continuing to practice that. But our lifestyle medicine group, Rochester Lifestyle Medicine group, the practice itself, we're going to be seeing a lot more patients one-on-one, which was not what I thought would initially happen. I thought we were basically going to be running group medical sessions in the form of CHIP and other things. But patients want to be seen one-on-one, and amazingly enough, doctors want to see patients one-on-one. So I'm not going to fight that. And I do think we will move forward a lot more with shared medical visits, which actually is a billable thing. So instead of a doctor seeing one patient for 10 minutes, and basically seeing 4 patients an hour, what they'll do is one doctor will see 8 patients in 2 hours, but they'll be there together the whole 2 hours. And being able to go through all this and discuss it in little groups. And I think economically that will become viable when the insurance companies come around. Not every doctor wants to sit in a room with a lot of patients, but I do think that's going to be powerful moving forward.
So what are the skills that a doctor needs to do that they are not being taught right now?
Great question. So for one thing, you need to understand plant-based nutrition. You need to understand nutrition in general.
Yeah.
And that's definitely not taught in medical school, and it's becoming more of an interest of newer medical students. So I think that's going to be taken care of. I think some of the stuff is just sort of natural skill that people kind of are born with. Not everybody is going to ever have great bedside manner and be able to carry on a group visit. Although I think it can be taught. I mean, there certainly are principles involved. Motivational interviewing, these kinds of things. You can be coached on learning that. There's some acting involved. So I think that could be taught. And certainly there's probably a lot more docs out there who could learn it who haven't. So the interviewing skills, motivating skills, that type of thing will definitely become important.
Cool.
Yeah.
How did you learn how to influence patients? Was it sort of on the job training, or did you go back for motivational interviewing or other techniques?
So obviously I'm still learning. We're all becoming better communicators as we grow up, and I think I make progress every day. It's always been fairly easy for me to carry on conversations with people of all backgrounds, and I've always sort of prided myself in that. And you try to read who it is. If it's someone can identify with me, I may use more scientific facts. May talk more about the studies, and I try to make you try to make a human connection first. I think it's important that people feel as if they're being understood. There's one of the laws of the 7 habits, right? One of the 7 habits is seek first to understand,
right?
Then to be understood. You really need people to feel as if you understand them, and you're not, and that's not acting. You really do need to understand someone before you can try to help them because you have to help them move from where they are. I think treating people with respect is really important. I think people are often a lot smarter than we give them credit for, and you just have to learn what language they're speaking, and what words mean to them. So as far as those skills, they're definitely evolving.
Gotcha. Boy, for someone who doesn't like the word marketing, you're awfully good at it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you. So I'm trying to understand. I mean, marketing doesn't have to be evil. I get that, and you have to live in the world that we live in, which is there's Facebook and Twitter and these things. Whether you like them or not, that's how people are communicating, and they clearly have power over people. I mean, one of the examples I joke about is there may be if you want to meet a mate, and you want to go to a bar to meet them, right? Well, but your favorite bar, there's nobody there. There's no point in going to that bar.
Yeah.
You need to go to the bar where everybody is, even if you don't like that bar. So, right? Not that I've ever really done that, but you get the idea. I mean, you need to be practical about it. So if the way we're communicating is through Facebook and Twitter and various other online methods, well, we have to adapt to that, and we have to learn it. We also have to remember that once in a while we got to put our devices down and go out in the woods. I do that. I try to do that every day. And I think that's important too.
Right.
That's actually part of lifestyle medicine. So it's getting people out in this nature deficit disorder. But
right, we need especially those of us in the plant-based and lifestyle movement, we need to get our energy from the wider world and then bring back the gifts to the humans. If we just stay in the human world, we end up just like everybody else.
Right.
In cat fights and pettiness and depression.
Yeah, right. We don't want that.
No.
Yeah.
We know the secret source, so we need to keep going there, right?
Exactly. So I'm one of my passions is birding. I'm out birding every day, and I can't really stop birding, so I'm always hearing birds. And so I've actually, one of the things we're teaching our patients is actually how to become a citizen scientist, how to get out in the woods and really commune. So I know becoming a citizen scientist makes it sound like there's actually some kind of purpose involved, and there is, but I just think getting out there is so great for people. So
now, unfortunately, I have to go, but that could be a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
My running buddy Gio is a birder, so
is that right?
So I'll be sort of panting and my feet are like making loud paving sounds, and all of a sudden he'll stop and he'll say, "Wood thrush."
Yeah, exactly. I do that all the time. So actually, I carry a little handheld dictaphone, so I can keep track of the birds. So when I get home, I make the list. So you might suggest that to your friend who's a runner. You can just keep a list that way.
Oh, okay. Cool. So sometimes your transcription service gets really confused.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Yeah.
I didn't quite get the dosage of that.
Right.
No, it's an Oriole.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Well, Dr. Veggie, Dr. Ted Barnett, this was so much fun connecting with you.
Oh.
I'm glad we finally got around to doing it.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, been a real pleasure.
Be well, and we'll continue our conversations.
All right, thank you.
Oh, wait. Before we go, how can people find out more about you? How can they follow you? How can they, if they're in the Rochester area, how can they use your services?
So you can start, if you just want to Google something easy, Rochester Lifestyle Medicine, and you'll get in touch with us that way. But our URL is rocklifemed.com, ROCLIFECOM.com, rocklifemed, ROCLIFEMED.com.
Okay.
But if you just Google RochesterLifestyleMedicine.com. Also, if you're interested in veganism, you can look up rochesterveg.org. And we run the Rochester Area Vegan Society as well. That meets once a month. So we're coming at it from a whole bunch of different directions. And then there's the Rochester Lifestyle Medicine Institute, which we'd love it if you could support. It's our nonprofit, and we are still getting started with our fundraising efforts, but we'd like that to become a national resource. We think that if we can, it is a local organization in the sense that it has the name Rochester in it, but we think Rochester is a really good laboratory for focusing in on one metropolitan area and then spreading out to the rest of the country and then the rest of the world once we succeed here, because we'd like lifestyle medicine to really be the go-to for everybody.
Yeah, well, we might as well scale stuff that works.
Exactly.
Given a choice.
Yeah.
Like, they're doing great things in Detroit around with the plant-based nutrition support group. And so that's something that we're looking to replicate in other communities. And Rochester certainly is a hotbed. It may be reaching a tipping point, a critical mass in terms of people understanding. And so rather than, spending our effort and our marketing money on a national level, I think it makes sense to hit community after community and actually have some impact. Right.
No, you're absolutely right. And our direction really, we're trying to direct our energies right into the healthcare system itself. I call it marching into the belly of the beast, because it needs to be when the doctors are logging into their electronic healthcare record that lifestyle medicine is one of the options featured at the very top of their list of ways to treat people. The insurance companies need to accept this as a way going forward, that this is a primary place they should be putting their money. It's great for healthcare systems are all competing over things like bariatric surgery and their cardiac cath labs, because that's where the glamour is, that's where a lot of the money is right now. We need to make this not only glamorous, but we need to make it a viable career path for physicians going into practice. That's our real goal, because until that happens, it's not going to be taken seriously.
Viable and glamorous career goal.
That's right. Career path.
Right. Yeah. Well, unfortunately, you've already cornered the market on Dr. Veggie, so everyone else is going to need their own superhero moniker.
Right, exactly.
All right, so I'll throw those all in the show notes, and hopefully we can keep rolling the ball forward.
Beautiful. Okay.
All right. Thanks a lot, Ted.
My pleasure. Take care.
Bye-bye. All right. I don't know about you, but I have a lot of hope in my heart after listening to the vision and the work and the experiences of Ted Barnett. The revolution will certainly be delicious. If you enjoyed this episode of the Plant Yourself podcast and you'd like to support our mission, one way to do that is to subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. And for more information about WellStart Health, remember we're starting a new cohort on August 6th. It's a 12-week intensive followed by 9 additional months of support, ongoing help and support to help you become your healthiest, best, leanest, fittest you. If you know enough about me and Josh Lajani and about our work with Big Change that you're just ready to sign up, you can do that at wellstarthealth.com/apply. If you'd like to find out more, you can check out bigchangeprogram.com, and you can also sign up for those 2 webinars we talked about at plantyourself.com/now. Hey, we got a lot of show notes for today's episode, a lot of links. Ted Barnett is a researchy kind of guy, so we have a whole bunch of links to the studies he talked about, including that amazing study about the lack of randomized controlled trials of parachutes. You can just grab that right from the show notes, which you can find at plantyourself.com/280. If you're new to the show, you can catch up on 279 archived episodes over at plantyourself.com. All right, in garden news, the kale is starting to give up the ghost. We're just getting our last leaves. We're going to have to pull harlequin bugs off of the bottoms of most of them, or their nasty little egg sacs. And looks like we're going to have to be going back to supermarket greens in just a little while. The elderberries are still coming in really strongly. Blueberries are close to done, getting a half a Ziploc bag a day now. That's freezer gallon size, so it's still nothing to sneeze at, but not the 2 or 3 bags we've been getting so far. And looks like the grapes are ripening. Last year we didn't get a single grape, but this year I guess I was able to lay off the heavy pruning, so the grapevine is coming back and going to produce some beautiful, sweet Scuppernong muscadines. In running news, my ankle is looking better. I had it professionally taped up this past weekend for the Ultimate Masters Championships in Chicago area, in Aurora, Illinois. And I'm happy to report that my team, Triaged, came in 4th nationally. We won our first 3 games in pool play, and then we won our quarterfinal game to make it into the semifinals, into the top 4, where we got schooled twice. And so we come home with a great record, and we also come home having learned a ton. And just like when we mess up in our diets or any other aspect of our lives, all it is data for better performance in the future. So looks like I'll be staying off the ankle for another few days, and then probably this coming weekend back to jogging, and then a summer of sprints and defensive drills so that I can be a valued member of the team as we move forward. All right, so some thanks are in order. Of course, Will Ridenauer. Let's hear it. Let's bring up the sound of Sabali Dawn, the Dance of Peace. Check out willridenauer.com for more of his beautiful kora music from Western Africa. And, of course, thanks to all you Plant Yourself podcast patrons, as in Kim Harrison, Lynn McClellan, Anthony Diston, Brittany Porter, Dominic Maurer, Barbara Whitney, Tammy Black, Amy Good, Amanda Hatherley, Mary Jane Wheeler, Alan Kennelly, Melissa Cobb, Rachel Burns, Christine Nielsen, Tina Scharf, Tina Ahern, Jen Foganovsky, David Bizek, The Mysterious, Michelle X, Elizabeth Feldman, Victoria Dolomanova, Leah Stroll, Alan Christensen, Colleen Peck, Michelle Andrew, Josiane, Julianne Roland, Stu Nolnick, Sarah Stark, Dirkus, Renzo Circus, Kelly Cameron, Wayne Pedersen, Leanne Peterson, Janet Selby, Claire Robinson, Franzek, Jeanette Bennett, Miguel Sarah, David Donahue, Blair Cyber, Dora Naviezo, Gio, and Carolyn Argentati, Jody Friesner, Ruth Ann Vanderberg, Misha Rosen, Michael Warbeck, The Equally Mysterious, Tracy Zielish, Lammers, Rebecca Hughes, Val Lindemann, rhymes with cinnamon, Nick Harper, Stephanie Holmes, Martha Bergner, Nicole Ramsey, Susan Ahmad, Molly Levine, Inscrutable, Harry R., Susan Laverty, The Panda Vegan, Craig Kovic, Adam Sharp, Karen Burry, Heather Morgan, Ashley Corcoran, Kelly Machia, Deanne Norton, Bonnie Lancha, Plant Happy Oregon, Sabina Kurtzels, Nigel Davies, Marion Bloom, Carissa Copelshell, Rutledge, Julian Watkins, Breed O'Connell, Brian Sheridan, Shannon Hirschman, Kate Rose, Linda Ayat, Julie Langholm, Hedegaard, Isa Tuzin, Wak, Connie Hainline, Aaron Greer, Alicia Davis, Aviva Lyle, Heather O'Connor, Carolyn Jensen, Sherry Orlakowski of Plant Powered for Health, Karen Smith, Scott Morani, Karen and Joe Crabtree, Tanya Lewis, Kirby Burton, Teresa Carell, Kevin McCauley, Elizabeth Rothschild, Kelly Baker Miracle, Ann Jesse, Cheryl Dwyer, Jenny Hazelton, Larry Peltier, Peter W. Evans, Colleen Harrison, Justine Divitt, Joshua Sommermeyer, Dennis Bird, Darby Kelly, and Lori Fanny for your generous support of the podcast. That's it for this week. As always, be well, my friends. All right, time for thanks. Thanks to Will Ridenauer for allowing me to use his beautiful song Sabali Dawn, the Dance of Peace. You can find more of Will's music at his website, willridenauer.com. And of course, thanks to all of you Plant Yourself podcast patrons. Kim Harrison, Lynn McClellan, Anthony Disson, Brittany Porter, Dominic Maurer, Barbara Whitney, Tammy Black, Amy Good, Amanda Hatherley, Mary Jane Wheeler, Ellen Kennelly, Mr. Cobb, Rachel Behrens, Christine Nielsen, Tina Sharp, Tina Ahern, Jennifer Kanofsky, David Bizek, The Mysterious, Michelle X, Elspeth Feldman, Leah Stoller, Alan Christensen, Colleen Peck, Michelle Landry, Josina, Sarah Durkis, Rhymes with Circus, Kelly Cameron, Wayne Pedersen, Janet Selby, hi Janet, Claire Adams, Tom Franzek, Jeanette Benham, Gil Lassert, David Donahue, Blair Cyber, Dorona Vizov, Gio and Carolyn Argentati, Jody Friesen, Ruth Ann Funderburg, Misha Rosen, Michael Warbeck, the equally mysterious Tracy Z, Aviva Lael, Alicia Lemus, Rebecca Hughes, Val Linneman, Rhymes with Cinnamon, Nick Harper, Martha Bergner, Susan Ahmad, Ollie Levine, the inscrutable Harry R., Susan Laverty, the Panda Vegan, Craig Kovic, Adam Scharf, Karen Burry, Heather Morgan, Kelly Machia, Deanne Norton, Bonnie Lynch at Plant Happy Oregon, Sabina Kurtzels, Nigel Davies, Marion Blum, Teresa Coble, Julian Watkins, Breed O'Connell, Shannon Hirschman, Linda Ayat, Home Hedegaard, Izatu Wa, Connie Hainline, Aaron Greer, Alicia Davis, Heather O'Connor, Carolyn Jensen, Sherry Orlikoski of Plant Powered for Health, Karen Smith, Scott Morani, Karen Jo Crabtree, Tanya Lewis, Kirby Burton, Teresa Carell, Kevin McCauley, Elizabeth Rothschild, Ann Jesse, Cheryl Dwyer, Jenny Hazelton, Valerie Peltier, Peter W. Evans, Colleen Harrison, Justin Divitt, Joshua Sommermeyer, Dennis Bird, Darby Kelly, Lori Fanny, Linnea Lundquist, Valerie Hummel, Emily Iaconelli, Levy Wallach, Rosamund McAtee, Dan Picorni, Stephen Lehman, Patty DiMartino, Mike and Donna Kartz, Deanne Bishop, Bill Brielf, Gunter Schmidt, Marjorie Lewis, Kelly Molden, Trish Adams, Ian Kramer, Nancy Sheldon, Lindsay Bayshore, Gunmarie Hagan, Tracy Gullich, Laura Heaton, Meg from Mama Says, Rochelle Kennedy, Diana Goldman, Stacey Stokes, Ben Savage, Michael Kay, Holly Butler, David Hughes, Connie Rogers, Claire England, Sally Robertson, Param Ganshi, Amy Daly, Brian Tourville, Mark Jeffrey Johnson, Josie Dempsey, Karen Schmidt, Pamela Hayden, Emily Perryman, Olga Sidorowska, Allison Corbett, Richard Stone, Lauren Vaught of Edible Musings, Aaron Hasty, Sean Owen, Sagar Nayak, Erica Piedra, Danielle Roberts, Michael Lushton, and Sarah Johnson for your generous support of the podcast. That's it for now. As always, be well, my friends.